This is a huge victory for all of us who've ever been hurt, for both of us who have been affected by Harvey Weinstein specifically, and also the greater, the bigger amount of people in the world. This affects so many. But to us specifically, it's a huge moment. And it's one, I have to honestly say, I thought he was going to be exonerated.
I did wonder that, actually, Rose, because the jury had been out for a significant amount of time. And I just wondered whether, because you were outside the court, weren't you, after the verdict, I just wondered whether you had sort of lost hope that you might get the justice that you needed.
Well, I never really had hope, you see. And I realized that the other day when someone asked me, do you have hope that he'll be found guilty? And I realized the last time I actually had hope was the moment before I was raped by him. And after that, it became survival. And after that, it became this like battle in a huge war. I didn't have hope, but not because of the jury. And I'm very grateful to that jury for getting a lot farther than most juries get in rape cases, certainly. And there's something so profound about the amount of corruption behind the scenes. So for me, I was just really worried about, from what I know on the back end of things, it's hard to speak publicly about it because you can't without getting sued. But it's an extraordinary moment, and it's a watershed moment.
A watershed moment, but not the final moment. This journey is really, in some senses, legally just beginning, isn't it?
Yes, that is correct. There will be the LA trial, and the court sentencing here is on March 11th. It's a never-ending kind of situation. You do wish, I wish it would end, but this is an unbelievable achievement. Just to simply have a woman who has been raped by somebody be in a court pointing at their accuser saying, you did this to me, that is a privilege, because that is incredibly rare. There's a 2% conviction rate in almost all rapes. And that's an astounding number of people that walk free, an astounding number of victims that never get any kind of measure of justice. So I found it that we were winning just by even having it in the court. That's how little we've been taught to expect. You
personally did not exercise that privilege in New York. Are you hoping to do so when the trial starts in Los Angeles?
Yes, but I couldn't exercise the privilege because it didn't happen to me in New York.
But what happened to you was in 1997. Are you still able to take your case to trial?
No, I am not able to. There's a statute of limitations, so I will never have that kind of day in court. But what I can do is kind of an Annabella Sciorra, who was the incredibly brave woman who was also raped by Harvey Weinstein in the 90s. And her testimony was really vital to giving context that this is a long-standing pattern, and it's not something that just happened out of the blue.
So will you be able to, even though your case won't go to trial, will you be able to speak in court as a witness?
I don't know if it's as a witness or how they want to couch my credit there, but yes, I would be able to.
You not only were a victim of Harvey Weinstein personally, in physical sense, you say, but also later you had a long battle because he came after you, didn't he?
He very much came after me. He and his giant machine of other monsters. I don't know how, enablers, people that he paid to do dastardly things that, sound like they're out of a spy novel, but they were my life. And the other night, I have to be honest, I was sitting at home and I was thinking I should do the laundry. And then I thought, oh, I wonder if he gets convicted, if he'll hire a hitman to kill me. Oh, I wonder what I want for dinner. These are just casual thoughts in my life. And that's what's so wrong and sick. And that's why I have fought so hard for this to stop. But more importantly, I fought for a global cultural reset, because this still happens. While we're speaking, people are being raped all over the world, and they will never have a voice in this. So I wanted to come and be a voice for those who'll never get a chance to stand and say to the world, because I have a unique situation in that I can speak to people in the world through a camera, through your show, things like that. And we have to keep and hold, the reason that we fight is not just personal, but it's also for, the greater cultural reset that I was looking for.
We spoke to a lawyer who is representing victims here, who talked about the pressure of the NDAs that people were having to sign, which meant they couldn't even tell their own husband, what had happened to them. They couldn't seek the advice of a therapist because that was prevented under the NDA, and they couldn't go and talk to their priest about it. The sort of the silencing of people who'd been assaulted must be part of the trauma.
You're right, Susanna, and I'm really glad that you are starting to talk and people are starting to talk more about the trauma of all of it, because there is, you know, when you see people and you wonder all of a sudden why they disappear from the screen, or maybe they disappear from their workplace, or their life starts going down the tubes. And can you imagine having something so traumatic and you have to just keep it isolated inside of your own mind and soul and body? That's a brutal form of torture. And that's while the other person goes along merrily with their existence, gets off scot-free.
Do you think there are many more cases which we don't know about, which have yet to come to light?
Yes.
How many?
Do I think they're maybe on a level of a Harvey Weinstein, who I think probably, if we do the math and do it correctly, he could potentially be one of the biggest serial rapists in history, because he had a full machine set up only to rape. You know, movies, that was his living, but there was a rape factory. That was what the business was about behind the scenes. Every time he had to make a settlement and make a payout, you know, at the Weinstein Company later, he had to make a payment to the board for $350,000, let's say, if he paid somebody $100,000. So this is the kind of human trafficking that goes on, and it goes on in Hollywood, and it goes on all over the world. And when we think of human trafficking, you know, I think most people think of a street runaway, you know, being prostituted at a truck stop. But in reality, it's in all levels, high levels of society and low levels.
Rose, your book is called Brave, and it recounts a lot of this and the effect of this on you and other women. The reason it's called that is because it takes so much courage to speak out when someone is that powerful. Just explain why it is so hard for individual women to come out publicly and say this happened to me without repercussions, because the repercussions are so damaging, aren't they? I mean, your career collapsed after what happened to you.
Yeah, immediately collapsed, immediately, and that's it's so unfair. You get punished twice, and then you get punished over and over, and you get punished by strangers and by people that look at you with these kind of knowing looks in their eyes, you know, and it's this kind of, and it lends this kind of paranoid feeling, except for it's not paranoia because it's actually happening. So for a lot of women, I imagine they would look at, you know, how I was treated, say, in the media, or how many of us have been treated, and say, why would I want to do this? You know, all I can say is, for some, it's extremely important to have a voice when they've been silenced for so long. Others can deal with it by speaking to people in their own life, you know, their clergy, their therapists. There are many different ways, and not everybody, you know, everyone has their own story. And while a lot of our stories are similar, our own life situations are unique to us. And you have to be able to judge for yourself what you're going to be able to handle, because I can tell you it will be the fight of your life.
And how have you survived then over the past 20 years since you started all this? Professionally, you paid a price. You mentioned it affects the way that you think. I mean, how have you got through that time?
You know, I wrote a book called Brave. It's not about Me Too or any of that. It compares, it's a how-to book, essentially. It's a how to be brave. And I use my own life stories as examples. That helped me. I was lonely for a really long time. In the last 4 years, I've made an album and an art project that's coming out called Planet 9. So I work a lot of things through with my art, but it was incredibly isolating and incredibly lonely. I would go to events in Hollywood and be sat next to, you know, people that I won't name here, and they would simply just turn their face away, like I had something they didn't want to catch.
He will be sentenced.
So you get punished.
Yeah, he'll be sentenced in a few days' time. he possibly will get 29 years in prison for what he did. Is that enough?
Yes, for me personally, I would just rather he cease to exist. I think the world would be better off, but I'm happy there is one less serial predator on the streets, because I can tell you that people would not be safe if he was out. And it's going to have to be enough. For most of us, this is more justice than most will ever see. And so it's an incredible moment. My brain is not at its most succinct today, because it's just this incredible, overwhelming amount of emotions and just this kind of floodgates of stress that are just starting to recede after being so high for so long. But it is, you know, this whole thing is a tragedy. None of this had to happen.
And are there, I mean, one of the reasons also you may not be able to think entirely straight is because it is 3:20 in the morning where you, and we do appreciate where you are, and we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Are there, though, other people out there now in positions of power in Hollywood and elsewhere who should be feeling nervous this morning?
Absolutely. And I think what this shows is that the old ways of treating, you know, rape victims on the stand in trial by slut-shaming them, by calling them every name in the book. You know, we've all heard it for so long, these kind of tactics. But now, thankfully, juries, I hope, will start to see through it. More laws will be passed, you know, that will help us as a culture start understanding more about what consent means. It's so big. I wish I'm normally quite good with words, but I'm really at a loss because I'm still in shock, I have to tell you the truth. I was really expecting to have to deal with the flood of, is this the end of Me Too, the media narrative running with that, you know? And so I'm kind of spun right now, but I can tell you the young girl that I was is giving a high five to the woman I am today.